Just as things were about to escalate, Elric suddenly raised his hand. Silence. Everybody listened carefully now. Elric-sama has something to say. Gavin yelled. Somehow, he had moved down from the second floor to right next to Elric without anyone noticing. Elric nodded his head in satisfaction. Slowly glancing at the surroundings, he began to speak. Members of the council. At this moment, in this place, you may express your opinion freely. Will you join us and become the champions that will eliminate the Demon Lord? Or will you seek alliance with the Demon Lord and stand against humanity? I, Elric von Ingratia, believe that the fellow representatives of the Western nations will make the right call. Elric's eyes shone, almost as if presenting on a stage. Oi, are you deciding to vote on the subject now? I asked unconsciously. Elric nodded as if this was only natural. So, with all the mess he was making, he still wanted to save some face. Moreover, even if they started voting, they wouldn't get over half of the supporting votes. Isn't that only natural? Of course, we will determine the issue democratically with the majority vote. However, it won't matter whether or not we even hold a vote since I am certain that the council will agree to my plan. That line caught my attention. His confidence almost implied that the result had been fixed internally. Actually, now that I thought about it, a lot of things were strange about this guy. Even if he was a prince, where did he get the balls to mess around in the venue where all the nation's representatives were gathered? Normally, such an act would not be tolerated. Then what was the reason for his confidence? Answer. There's a high likelihood that most of the councilors have been bribed. Ah, no wonder. I didn't expect him to bribe even foreign councilors. If this were handled poorly, it could lead to an international incident, which was why I didn't think he would resort to such a dangerous tactic. It was my miscalculation that led to this mistake. Then, let us vote. Let's have a fair and just verdict. We shall defeat the Demon Lord and dominate him. Those who approve of this idea, please stand up. As the prince's voice rang, several sneering councilors stood up. I see, so they were all in on this from the get-go. If this was the case, then it really couldn't be helped. Even though the situation wasn't ideal, we still had plenty of them. Even if it were to be rejected, we would just have to go from there. Now we can only accept the result of the vote. Report. There are no issues. Everything is within expectations. Within expectations. Raphael-san sent me the impression of an evil grin. On that note, didn't Sao's investigation reveal a lot of things? For instance, the world's view on our nation, the treasury of different kingdoms, as well as the reactions of different royal families to the event. There were even records of each nation's meetings. All of this was investigated thoroughly by Wisdom King Raphael-san. I quickly formulated a file of documents inside my stomach. I took it out and found that they were several ledgers. Ah, it's the ledger under the counter. So, you really got everything under the control, Raphael-san. Before I knew it, Raphael-san had grasped the weak points of the colluding councilors. The ledger had detailed information about who had taken bribes. If this were to go public, it would severely affect their careers. Once we had hard evidence of their embezzling, all of this would just be a silly drama. We worked discreetly. As expected from Wisdom King Raphael-san, how fearsome. Report. There is no need to present this evidence. Master has already won. As I was just wondering what that meant, the result came. Several councilors stood up and began to applaud. Seeing this, Elric began to deliver his victory speech. The verdict is decided. The votes are over half, and the motion has been passed. Elric said smugly. Gavin and Reiner also held disgusting smiles and prepared to arrest us. However, they got a bit too ahead of themselves. Most councilors were actually still seated, and there were less than a third of the members standing. That idiot Elric, being so confident in his scheme, had begun bragging about his victory without even checking. Even the councilors who supported Elric realized that there weren't enough votes for the motion. They looked around in panic, pale, as they realized they were the minority. The result was obvious. Those who were against the idea of defeating the Demon Lord aka me were the majority. The number of pages in the ledger was greater than the number of councilors who have stood up for Elric. That number was enough to make the majority, but some of the councilors seemed to have changed their minds. Answer. It seems that with the deactivation of mental interference, they have recovered their conscience. I see. So, they realized how stupid they were after regaining reason. That was certainly good to know. So, all the fellow councilors had decided to join forces with me based on the rules of justice and fairness. Even though some were moved by bribery before. Answer. That was likely an effective mental interference. It could evoke people's desire. It seems to have an extraordinarily strong influence. Then I kind of felt sorry for them. It was just like Masayuki's unique skill hero. Similarly, that skill affected the mind, which was very difficult to deal with. Masayuki, however, had no control over it. But this time, the people who orchestrated this incident seemed to be selective with their targets. I wasn't sure who did this, but it was definitely a problematic opponent. Could it be that blonde? Anyway, surely those councilors who have regained their reason were able to tell what's right and wrong. Then I would treat them with the same courtesy and keep their embezzlement a secret. But if one councilor's judgment could determine the fate of a nation, then there was something wrong with the system. If organizations like the League of Nations or the United Nations couldn't maintain their integrity and assess themselves accordingly, it would become corrupt. If the councilor representing a nation turned corrupt, people would also think ill of the nation they represented. If the fate of a nation were so closely tied to one individual's personality and dignity, I hope they would choose them more carefully. But that shouldn't really be of me concern. The problem lay with the people standing in front of us. People who committed illegal acts needed to pay. But before that, I needed to sort this delusional idiot out and make him realize the predicament he'd landed in. Oi, will you calm down now? Take a look at what is really going on, I said casually to Elric. What are you? He still hadn't realized his situation. His sheer stupidity was embarrassing to watch. Are you a clown, honk honk? Hinata suddenly called out. What? Oops, how rude of me. Prince Elric-sama is just too hilarious. Hinata had watched this whole charade with cold eyes. Even as she began to come to my aid, she still looked calm. However, she had already entered her fighting mode. I didn't want to lose my momentum, but Hinata simply wouldn't stop. Looks like more than half of the people here voted against you. As the third party who stands on a fair and just ground, I shall announce this verdict as final. And regarding the matter of whether you have the authority to initiate such a vote, the council shall hold an investigative inquiry later on. How can this be? You guys, are you betraying me? Elric complained loudly. Ha, funny. Things turned out pretty different from how he imagined. His narcissism made his actions even more laudable. Hinata seemed pleased at this, just as I was, to see all the unpleasantness gone. And indeed, Elric-sama has a point, Gavin said. Do you have any idea what you are doing? To have the guts to do something like this, I'll see to it that our nation's aid will. Hold on, what's that supposed to mean? Count Gavin, could you elaborate on that? Interrupted the tired-looking speaker. While Gavin's protests were almost incomprehensible, it was mixed with phrases that couldn't be unheard. Like our nation's aid. Report. There is available information about it from the documents. Hearing Raphael sense words, I checked the files and found detailed records there. Anti-flooding construction in the kingdom of Rybok. Food support for the drought in Karnata. There were other nations here as well, and they seem to have promised them all sorts of aids in payment. So, were they all tasked with what is happening today? By the way, if you were to cancel these aids just because they won't proceed with your plans, it will basically be a public announcement that your actions were nothing but despicable bribery. What? How do you know such classified information? Elric was unable to respond, while Gavin began to shout, trying to hide his panic. I, on the other hand, was not in a rush nor panic. I merely gave them a smug smile. By doing so, surely, they would have a wrong impression of me. Since I didn't really know what was going on, either. I only did that because Raphael said so, and that was about it. Elric's party was in shock. The speaker seemed to realize what was going on as he began to glare at Elric and his men. The tide had quickly turned, and now we had the high ground. A councilor attempted to sit down in the chaos, but I refused to allow that. So I used sticky steel web to stop their movements. I already warned you. We aren't going to clean up the mess idiots like you make, said the commander of the Apostles of Verd. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman from the voice. It appeared that they had severed ties with Elric completely. The victor had been decided. And at that moment, my goal was practically complete. But what I didn't realize then was that there were still fools who couldn't admit defeat. Quit joking around. Elric-sama, don't worry. When I defeat the Demon Lord, all these problems will be resolved. Oh, Reiner. Sir Reiner, you have a point. You're still our strongest trump card. You are the most reliable. They were relentless. At this point, did they still want to continue what they were doing and ignore the council's will? That might be a bit too reckless. What was going through these idiots' minds? Do you guys seriously think you can defeat me? What kind of stupid line is that? Of course we are. Are you scared or something? If you come and lick my boots right now, I might let you live and without torture, Reiner responded crudely. He was dangling the domination orb as he spoke, looking like he wanted to control me with that. Following Reiner's lead, Guy gave some sort of order to the soldiers. At that, the soldiers quickly began to block the doors. By the looks of it, they didn't plan to let anyone escape the room, and had determined to remedy their previous miscalculation by force. The members of the Apostles of Verd all stepped back, but there were some other high-level adventurers present as well. They began to draw their weapons against us. You people, how dare you show weapons here? What kind of lunacy is this? The speaker shouted. However, the second floor was soon blocked by the soldiers as well. His voice quietened quickly after that, seemingly having been kidnapped by a couple of councilors. Please don't blame me for this. I thought, ready to take action, but then, Hinata got there before me. How barbaric. As the witness, I cannot sit and watch this transpire, moreover. Haven't you insulted me enough already? Hinata finished, smiling dangerously at Reiner. The venue prohibited any weapon, so instead, she began to fight with her fists. She fought just as ferociously as she would have with her sword. This guy was toasted. Rimuru, leave this fellow to me. Kukuku, that's pretty funny. I am the strongest man in Ingratia, I'm gonna rip that smile off your face. Saint, my ass. People praise you as humanity's guardian, and now you've let it all get to your head. Well, that ends today, I shall teach you to face reality. Reiner bit off more than he could chew in saying this to Hinata. He wasn't that weak, to be honest. Being above rank A, if he were to battle Maj and Jelmet, I was sure they would end up in a tie. But he didn't know the sheer distance between heaven and earth. Perhaps his talent seemed impressive in a peaceful kingdom. While he was strong, he wasn't really subjected to battle against monsters often. And so, Reiner had no idea how strong monsters really were. I was just like him in that aspect. Then let me handle the demon lord. Okay. Don't kill him, guy. We've given you the holy sword, use it to its full potential. That goes without saying. With gear like this, I'll never lose. Guy planned to fight me. He seemed to have received some amazing weapon and was showing it off. But that kind of stuff was, at most, around unique grade. Moreover, if Guy was relying on skills and gear, the challenger himself probably wouldn't be too strong himself. Guy might have been above rank A, but he still posed no threat against me now. It would be pretty troublesome to have to deal with a guy like this at this point, that was my genuine thought. But it seemed that I wasn't needed, after all.